Well, it is a policy which is failing time and again, but China fails to learn from its lessons. We're talking about the failed zero COVID policy of China, a country which is battling a surge in COVID-19 infections. This is Health with Sneha. I'm Sneha Mordani. We're going to talk about China's position vis-a-vis the infections and also how there is a surge in India, and also not to forget the WHO now wanting to do a rethink on whether there could be a lab leak essentially that eventually led to the outbreak of the pandemic and caused mayhem, and how. We'll talk about that first. Beijing is seeing an outbreak of COVID-19 cases, and that's the reason why restrictions are coming back to China once again. So it's a never-ending battle as far as China is concerned, because experts world over have said that trying to eliminate COVID is never going to work. You're essentially going to be torturing your own population and troubling them and ruining your own economy when you try to ensure that there are no COVID cases. That isn't a situation that one can be in ever. It does not look like. So why is then China pursuing the zero COVID policy and trying to do away with the infection, putting its people to inconvenience, forceful lockdowns, quarantine camps, ill treatment as far as the treatment of its own people is concerned, forceful RT-PCR tests and nucleic acid tests to ensure that they do not have the infection. Even asymptomatics or people with no signs of the infection, or no symptoms rather of the infection, are being put through quarantine camps, and there is little stress on vaccination. This is a flawed policy to begin with, is what experts have said. In the very latest, again, there is mass COVID testing in Beijing, which has been announced amid a ferocious outbreak. And here's what the Chinese president has had to say about COVID-19, talking about how this is justified and that one has to be persistent, indicating that we can't be letting our guard down. But letting our guard down in China does not mean going back to masking or going back to adhering to norms and restrictions. It means putting people through a great deal of inconvenience. What's really happening in China is unsustainable, is what the WHO has also said, in the light of the highly infectious nature of the infection. How do we control it? We need to manage the situation. Live with the virus is what the WHO has said. Take all precautions and also ensure that people are protected from severe disease. How is that going to be done? Well, that is going to be done once you ensure that your population is vaccinated. That is not something that the Chinese are laying stress on. They essentially haven't really focused on vaccinating the vulnerable, the elderly population, for example. Now, talking about China, the WHO in its own report, which is assessing the possible outbreak and how could have this outbreak happened of COVID-19 or the novel coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, has now indicated that not just the Wuhan market, which actually amplified the pandemic situation, but also the lab leak theory that needs to be looked at. Now, this is very interesting, given that previously the WHO had particularly indicated that it looks unlikely that the virus came out of a lab in Wuhan. So the WHO now open to probing the new evidence of COVID lab leak origin theory, is in a way accepting that pieces of data is missing. So there needs to be much more research to assess this lab leak theory, believed to have happened sometime around the year 2019, towards the end, possibly November, to then see how the virus essentially leaked out, possibly from a lab in Wuhan, and then moved on to different parts of the world like fire, and spread like fire, making millions ill, killing so many in the last almost 3 years that we've seen. The WHO, in the strongest terms yet, has said a deeper probe is required. So this essentially is a reversal from the original position that the WHO had taken. Now, talking about what's really happening in India as well, here are some more details. Cases are increasing in India. For example, in Delhi city, the positivity rate has crossed the 4% mark. Also, the R value or the R naught, essentially reflective of the manner in which the infection is spreading from one person to other, has gone past the 1 mark in many states in India. Certainly, cases are increasing. Now, in the last 1 week or so, we've seen about 50,000 cases. It's actually the biggest surge since January. Questions are being asked about whether this is the fourth wave of the pandemic or not. There are reasons to believe that it isn't. A, because there is no evidence that there is a sixth variant of concern. Not yet. Genomic sequencing hasn't revealed so. It does appear that it's Omicron and its subtypes that are mutating. This is what the ICMR or the Indian Council of Medical Research has also said. But there are concerns that cases will surge, and at the end of the day, one is worried about the outcome of the infection on the vulnerable population. So far, severity of the disease has not increased. Hospitalizations have not gone up. In fact, the number of 8,000 that we're looking at, for example, today is grossly an underestimate, given that many people are not even testing. No reason to panic or to believe that we have a fourth wave around the corner. But certainly every reason to be very, very cautious, not to lower our guard, and to ensure that we do what we can to keep the infection at bay and use the tools that we have in hand and continue to do so. Well, that is it from me for the moment. Just to remember, the Union Health Minister has called for a meeting today with states in which the message by and large is that the pandemic is not over. Far from it. We have the WHO to inform us about these developments of the pandemic being over. We still are not out of the woods just yet. Thank you so much for connecting. Hope you found this interaction useful. Thank you for joining us.